This is one of the most famous stories in the Bible, and it's not really about ancient history. It's about power, temptation, and what happens when we try to hide our mistakes instead of facing them. This is the story of King David and a woman named Bathsheba. To understand this story, you just need to know a few things about David. He started out as a shepherd boy, the youngest in his family, the one nobody expected much from. Then he defeated a giant named Goliath with nothing but a sling and a stone. And from there, his life just kept getting bigger. Eventually, he became king of Israel, one of the greatest kings the country ever had. He had won almost everything a person could win: armies, land, respect, wealth. He'd gone from being an underdog nobody believed in, to a man who could do almost anything he wanted, whenever he wanted. Every spring, kings in that region would lead their armies out to war. It's just what kings did. This particular spring, David sent his army out under his general, a man named Joab. But David didn't go. He stayed home in his palace. And that's actually where our story begins, not with a scandal, but with a king who had reached a point where it felt like the rules didn't quite apply to him anymore. One evening, David was walking on the roof of his palace, which, because it was the highest point in the city, gave him a clear view of everything below. And that's when he saw a woman bathing in a courtyard nearby. Her name was Bathsheba. David wanted to know who she was. His servants told him, and this is important, that she was already married. Her husband was a man named Uriah, one of David's own soldiers, actually one of his best and most loyal fighters. David sent for her anyway. Now, we have to be honest about what that meant. When the king of the entire nation sends for you, you don't really get to say no. This wasn't two people falling in love. This was a king using his power to take what he wanted, and Bathsheba had no real way to refuse him. Bathsheba became pregnant, and that's the moment everything starts to unravel. Instead of admitting what he'd done, David tried to fix it quietly. He called Uriah back from the battlefield, hoping that if Uriah went home and spent time with his wife, everyone would just assume the baby was his. Simple plan, right? Except Uriah wouldn't cooperate, not because he suspected anything, but because he was too loyal. He refused to go home and enjoy himself while his fellow soldiers were still out on the battlefield, sleeping on the ground. There's something almost painful about this part of the story. Uriah, without even knowing what David had done, was living out a level of loyalty and integrity that David himself, in that moment, clearly wasn't. Even when David got him drunk, hoping that would loosen him up, Uriah still wouldn't go home. So David made a much darker choice. He sent a letter back to the battlefield with Uriah. A letter that Uriah carried himself without knowing what was inside it. The letter told Joab, the general, to put Uriah in the most dangerous spot in the battle, and then pull the other soldiers back, leaving him exposed. Uriah was killed. And when David got the news, his response was almost chillingly casual. "That's just how war goes," he said. "Some die, some don't." Bathsheba mourned her husband, and once her mourning period ended, David brought her into the palace and married her. From the outside, it might have looked like David had done something almost kind, taking in a widow, but underneath it was the cover-up of an affair and a murder. Here's where the story takes a turn that makes it different from a lot of stories about powerful people getting away with things. God sent a prophet named Nathan to confront David. But Nathan didn't walk in and accuse the king outright. That would have been incredibly risky. Instead, he told David a story. There were two men in a town, Nathan said. One was rich, with more sheep and cattle than he could count. The other was poor and owned just one little lamb, a lamb he'd raised like a member of his own family. It ate from his plate. It slept in his arms. One day, a traveler visited the rich man. And instead of taking one of his own many animals to feed his guest, the rich man took the poor man's only lamb and served it up instead. David was furious when he heard this. "That man deserves to die," he said. "He has no pity at all." And Nathan looked David in the eye and said 4 words that changed everything. "You are that man." David had just condemned himself without realizing it. David didn't argue. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame Bathsheba or the war or anyone else. He simply said, "I have sinned." But saying sorry doesn't erase consequences. And this story doesn't pretend otherwise. The baby born from this relationship grew sick, and despite David begging, fasting, and grieving for days, the child died. What's interesting is what David did next. Once the child had passed, David got up, cleaned himself up, and went to worship. While the child was alive, there was still a chance, so he prayed and hoped. But once the child was gone, no amount of grief would bring him back. All David could do now was accept it and move forward. Here's the part of the story people sometimes forget. It doesn't end in total tragedy. David and Bathsheba had another son later on, a boy named Solomon. And Solomon would go on to become one of the wisest and wealthiest kings in Israel's entire history. Out of one of the darkest chapters of David's life, something good was still able to grow. So what's the takeaway here? This story isn't really about a bathing scene or a scandal. It's about what happens when someone with power convinces themselves the normal rules don't apply to them. David didn't fall because he was a uniquely terrible person. He fell because, for a moment, he believed he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. Maybe that's why we're still telling this story thousands of years later.